Charles and I have had different experiences in the plug-in vehicle world. Notice I didn't say electric vehicle. Back in 2012, I was in a car accident that totaled the gasoline-powered car that I was driving at the time, and gas was real expensive, so I ended up getting a Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid, and then 2 months later, my wife got one. Our internal joke is that we revolted, and then when my daughter got her driver's license, we bought one for her as well. Well, we leased 3 of them, and then we bought the next 3. So we've had two 2012s, a 2014, a 2015, a 2017, and I'm currently leasing a 2018 that I'm driving. But with COVID and the fact that I'm retired, when the lease is up, I may go down to us being a one-car family. My daughter's off to college. Charles, what have you had in the plug-in vehicle world?
I had, I guess it was either 2015 or 2014 BMW i3.
Tell us about how you got that car. That's a pretty funny story.
The first, it was the first BMW's electric vehicle. It was awesome because they had the i3 and the i8. The i8's their kind of big, more expensive one, and everybody kind of said that car, Buzz included, said it was hideous. Even like when we first heard about it, the guy at the dealership said it was kind of egg-shaped versus the i8 was sex on wheels. But Buzz and I, we did a review of the i3, so we test drove one, and I really liked it, and my wife loved it, and so...
And y'all weren't even married back then.
No.
Y'all were dating.
Yeah, and so at the time, she was about to need a new car, and I was like, well, how about we go look at an i3, because at a different dealership... not the one that said it looked like an egg. That was a different dealership. But at the dealership we rented it from, we went back up there and we talked to him, Pedro, and we he had some really just excellent deals on them. They were just really, really good stuff. And so we did. We drove it out. We got it that night, and we loved it. It's one of my favorite cars I've ever had.
And it's 100% electric. It's not
100%
a hybrid
electric,
like I was driving.
And I actually think it's a good-looking car. I do.
It's grown on me.
And my wife did too. It's an eye-catching car. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we drove and people just wanted to know what it is. One time we were even at a stoplight, and there was cops standing around at the stoplight for whatever reason, and they came to us and wanted us to roll down the window. We're like, what do we do? What do we do? And they look at us and we're like, what is this thing? We're like, that's kind of the attitude they had. And we're like, it's an i3, it's all electric. They're like, oh. And they kind of just rolled up our windows. They're like, they didn't care at that point. But anyway, it's just funny. It just everywhere we went, coming back, grocery shopping, there'd be people in the parking lot looking at it. Just tons of people. And again, I know the look's not for everyone, but we really liked it. And
what was the range on that?
Close to 100, 90 to 100. And we got pretty close to that. We didn't have the Rex, which is the extender.
Like the Volt or the
except
gasoline backup.
The difference between it's a gasoline backup, but the difference between the Volt and that is that it was just an extender. You couldn't fully run on the gas, I don't believe. On the Volt, you lose your mileage and then it automatically switches and you just keep going. And you could run the Volt entirely on gas if you wanted to and never charge it. On that one, it's I don't think it worked exactly the same.
And it only had a 2-gallon tank, right?
Right. It was a tiny thing, and it didn't give that. I think it extended it to 120, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there, 130. I don't know, but it wasn't that much of a huge thing. But it was loud, super loud, because the one that we test drove had it in there, and when it kicked in, you came down the street, it sounded like an old clunker car, bah, 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 bah. But the one we had did not have that, and that was okay for us because, we used it as most of the time, that's what we drove around in. If we had to go further out in DFW, we didn't drive it. We had, at the time, when we first got it, I had a 3 Series, a 328, and then I ended up getting a Volt. So we had a Volt and an i3. So that's my second plug-in electric vehicle I had, and unlike Buzz, I was never a huge fan of the Volt, but it wasn't the Volt itself that was the issue. It was just, I don't know, it just wasn't the car for me. I didn't like it for a lot of the various reasons.
And for me, it's the best car I've ever had. I absolutely love mine.
But also, I like on the i3, I liked not using any gas or any oil at all. Like that was something that was really cool, and my wife and I, we were worried about range anxiety at first, but you just get used to it, and you figure it out what you're going to do, and then the convenience of just coming home and plugging it in was awesome, and never having to worry about the gas side of it, and it worked out. So like if for those early electric vehicles, if you have like a 2-car family, like having a gas one that you can go for longer things works out really well. But now that all the new ones have such long ranges, like 200, 300 miles and beyond, like I don't think if you get one of those, I don't really think you have to have a gas vehicle, and that's kind of what we're proving today. Anyway, like we're gonna go. Texas is huge if you haven't been here. As Buzz said, it's like 630 something miles to do this trip we're doing.
Yeah, Texas is huge tracts of land.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like what. So, but seriously, I don't think people that aren't from here, they know Texas is big. Everything's bigger in Texas, but I don't think they realize how big it is. Isn't it from like Galveston, which is south tip of Texas, like?
Well, Brownsville's south tip.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, but isn't it from like Galveston to Dallas is further than from Dallas to Chicago, or something? There's some crazy.
Really?
There's some crazy statistic that people don't realize that's how big it is, and El Paso to the other side is just as big. But anyway, so the fact that we're able to do this, and we're going to do it in 2 stops, because that's another thing people talk about too, the having to stop and charge, and it just takes so much longer than gas. And yes, it does take longer, but you can plan that out accordingly too. Like it just takes a little bit more planning.
And like here, we're going to have meals.
Right? Yeah, we're going to eat during it, and if you just plan that along. Think of what you're doing. You're saving money. It's more convenient almost all the time. That's the other thing too. Like I said, just going into your house and using your house essentially as your gas station.
Yeah.
I mean that's something that you can't calculate before you actually do it. Like you won't know how that feels until you do it, and then you get used to it where you don't want to do anything else. Like,
oh, believe it or not, I had people that were looking at bolts back when I sold cars for a living, and they actually asked me, Charles, isn't it a pain to have to plug in when you get home every night? And it's like, no, it's wonderful. I don't have to go to a gas station. And my complaints about the gas station is, 1, I smell the fumes. 2, there's always going to be somebody standing over at a pump smoking, and I'm afraid of dying in the fire. That a panhandler come up, hey, I need to get out of town, you have some spare change. And then every time it seems, I don't know why it targets me, but it'll say it can't print my receipt, and I have to go stand in line behind everybody buying ices and Slurpees before I can get my receipt and be on my way.
Well, yeah, all of that, sure, but the big thing that gets me is like I'm a person that when I was driving a gas car, I would wait to the last minute to fill it up, and so if I don't have to fill it up when I'm already trying to get somewhere anyway, like. That's the convenience. Like when I get in my car in the mornings, it's going to have a full tank essentially, and that's just something huge. I don't think gas stations bug me as much as that does, but
they really annoy me.
They don't bug me like that, and I'm one of those people that likes the Slurpees and getting in line for that. But seriously, like it is just getting up and it's already charged and ready to go. But again, you have to make sure you do plug it in, and you do stay on top of that. But
my car sends me a text message if it's not plugged in by 9 p.m. It says, "Hey, I'm supposed to be plugged in," and I go out. If I forgot. Now again, with mine being a plug-in hybrid, I can always fall back on gasoline.
Right, and so the i3, and then my latest car is a Leaf, the 2018 Leaf when they redesigned it. Although
It's the 2nd gen.
Yeah, I didn't hate the 1st gen like Buzz. Buzz liked it, but he didn't like the outside. The only thing I didn't like about the outside of that one was kind of the bug eye headlights, and how they were supposed to be aerodynamic. But they changed that. The new one looks more like a typical sedan. There's a few flares here and there, but it very much looks like they're part of Nissan.
Oh yeah, they really improved the looks on it. I'll admit that.
And I liked it. I like the car a lot. I really do.
And they've got 2 different ranges: 150 miles and I think 250.
I have the 150 mile one because it was before they came up with the new. I think the new one's like a 60 kilowatt hour battery. I don't know.
Well, if it's going 250 miles, you had 60 to 65
I think mine's
kilowatts.
I think mine's a 40 is what mine is, and the newest one was a 60, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, like 150 was plenty for me for what I was doing.
And I think that's what people don't get, and that's, the average family in the United States owns like 1.8 cars. So most families out there have a couple of cars. So I hate it when people say electric cars are the cars of the future, because it's not the car of the future. It's the car of right now. And one of your cars in your family can be electric right now. And exactly what you're saying.
Right.
If you're staying, even the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is a gigantic area. But if
Yes.
you're staying within the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, 150-mile range is more than enough. And with a level 2 charger at home, even if you crept back into home with only 1 mile left, when you get up the next morning, it's fully charged.
Right.
In fact, just a few hours later, 6 hours later, it's fully charged.
And again, that's kind of what's the max range on the 2020 Bolt?
This one's 259.
259. So we're on that's a lot more than obviously 150, but most of them now are 200 plus, the ones that are being made.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're showing today. Like, you can do this, plan a few trips out. You can go all over Texas. It's,
And this is early in the build out of the infrastructure. That's another thing. People, I'm going to hold off on getting electric vehicle until they have, a lot more charging stations. The rollout is happening right now, and what we're showing, we're gonna drive right past some and ignore them. Belmead, Texas, Waco, Texas has them. We're hoping to not stop in Round Rock at the outlet mall.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have that food truck place you mentioned sounds really
Yeah.
good, but you can do it today, depending on where you're going. Now, I have talked to people that live in South Padre, and there are so few chargers down there. There's just no way to get down there with an electric vehicle, but like I said, that's changing. In fact, I'm on the board of the Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance, and we've been working with utilities and with the state government to show where the best places are to put the chargers. And so I'm on the inside seeing the infrastructure rollout. But again, they're ready to go today. You can have an electric vehicle today, and it'll be the coolest thing ever. There's no oil changes, no transmission fluid.
right.
The brakes are going to last probably longer than the car because they're regenerative. I mean, it's just awesome.
Well, and that's if you have two cars and one of them's gas, then you're covered, because, unless both of you and whoever you're living with, whatever, if you're gonna, let's say you and your spouse, unless both of you are driving these super extended periods to get to work, one of you could drive a shorter range one, the 150s, or even some of the ones that are 100.
I think that original i3 would still be a great vehicle today.
I do
On the
too.
used car market, they're inexpensive.
Yeah, they are, and that's the thing. Like the other thing about them too is that they're coming way down in price. Like the Kia has theirs. Isn't there? There's a Soul EV. Now the problem is that a lot of these aren't available in every state. Some of the ones that
you can actually
Niro,
get a Kia
Niro,
Niro in
Hyundai,
Texas.
yeah.
There's three dealerships in Texas that carry that.
And what about the Hyundai Kona?
The Hyundai Kona is sold in 11 states, and Texas is not one of them.
So
the important thing there is, and we call those compliance vehicles. They really build them to sell them in the CARB states so that they can get zero emission vehicle credits, which allow them to sell gasoline vehicles in those states.
Right.
So, and even Chevy does that. Chevy sells a lot. There were times that I could not get my hands on a Bolt EV. I'd have customers begging me to get them a Bolt EV, and we couldn't even order them because they were shipping them all off to the CARB states.
But there's a lot of vehicles that are coming too. So there's a lot of options, is what I'm saying. But the Kia Soul EV is a really inexpensive car that would have enough to do your average commute and all that, entirely on electric. And then if you needed a longer range one, you have either your gas, or you can get one like the Bolt or the Model 3. The Model 3 is more expensive because it's really hard to apparently get the $35,000 version. I don't even know if they have that anymore. But again, lots of cars are coming. Lots of cars. Volkswagen's doing one. Just every car company seems to be jumping into this. And that's awesome.
You mentioned range anxiety.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to make sure people realized, look at the bird over there. That's pretty cool, blue heron. Anyway, there are things you can do to extend your range. So what are some of the strategies you've used to get better range out of your car?
Well, for one, I'm a very conservative driver anyway. I really am. So essentially, what I'm saying is, don't floor it, don't drive like Buzz, or my wife, and that's a big thing of it. Use the regenerative braking if you can. Like, take your foot off the brake and just let it coast. You get where you can time that out really well at stop signs and stop lights. Try not. The more weight it is, the more drain it is on the battery. So, unless you absolutely have to, try not to overpack your car like to the brim. Like Buzz did that experiment with the Bolt where they put kayaks and all kinds of stuff. You could barely see out of the car.
Range.
Yeah, what did you say? Knocked it down like
about to 180. So it normally should get around 259, but it dropped down to 180.
So I would say those are the things. Also, I mean.
And that wasn't just weight, that was stuff on the outside of the car, so a lot of that was wind drag.
You can almost all the vehicles that I've driven have it on the maps thing. You can usually get in there and figure out where the electric charging stations are, and your like the i3, for instance, would tell you the range you had. So it would tell you what's in your range. Yeah, on the map, tell you the range you had to get into, how long you had to get to a gas station or charging station, and all that. So. Know your charging stations ahead of time. I would kind of have a plan of that, especially if you think it's going to be close. Just see where they're at, just in case.
And not if you're in a major city, because they'll be everywhere.
Right.
But on a long trip like this.
Right. So I would definitely plan that out ahead of time. But yeah, the big thing I would say, just drive it conservatively. And then they generally have different settings. I don't know if the Bolt does, but. Like the i3 and even my car, they have like eco modes. They have all kinds of additional things you can do. Now, on my Leaf, I drive it eco mode 100% of the time. I never turn it off. There is a big difference though when you turn it off as far as performance and speed and handling and all that. I think it's much faster, but again, I'm a conservative driver, so I have eco mode on all the time.
And I'm in sport mode all the time in my Volt.
Right, and that's the thing. So. But that's not to say that if you're one of those drivers like Buzz or my wife that you can't enjoy them, because EVs are also incredibly fast, incredibly responsive. That's a stereotype that I hate. I don't understand why people still cling to that. They are fast. They're not old, clunky, slow-moving vehicles.
Oh, no. Electric motors generate 100% of their torque starting at 0 RPM, so it's not like a gasoline-powered car where... Especially if you've ever driven a manual transmission, you have to feather the clutch so that you don't kill the engine because it doesn't have any power at low RPMs. And automatic transmission takes care of that for you. But with an electric car, if you punch it off the line, it's like a rocket ship. It just takes off. And you mentioned regenerative braking. For those of you who don't know what regenerative braking is, think of it this way. An electric motor, if you unplug it from its power source and crank it by hand, it becomes an electric generator. And basically the same thing happens with electric vehicles. When you take your foot off the accelerator, you're effectively unplugging it from its electric supply, but it's still connected to the wheels and the car's inertia is still rolling it forward. And so it turns into an electric generator, and the work it has to do generating electricity causes the car to have to slow down. And I talked to a guy with a Model Y Tesla just yesterday, and he said they've got 2 levels of regen. The Bolt EV has 4 levels of regen, so if you drive with the shifter in D, it feels like a gas car. You let off the accelerator and it coasts like a gas car does, and it generates a minimal amount of electricity. And there's a paddle over here on the left side of the steering wheel that if I let off the accelerator in D and squeeze the paddle, I get more regeneration. And what regeneration is it's generating electricity and putting it back into the battery. Now, it's not a perpetual motion machine, so it's not going to, fill the battery back up again, but it's going to extend your range quite a bit. And then on the shifter, and it's unfortunate, they, had the usual Prindle, PRNDL, and the L is not low gear in an electric vehicle. It's more aggressive regen. And I drive an L all the time. And so when I let off the accelerator, it feels like downshifting a manual transmission car, and that aggressive deceleration is more generation of electricity going back into the battery.
And it will come to a complete stop, too.
Oh, yeah, one pedal driving. And so In L, if I squeeze the paddle, it's even more regen and more deceleration. And in both of those cases, it will bring the car to a complete stop, even if you're going downhill. If you're on, say, an overpass or a hill heading downhill, and you've got it in L and take your foot off the accelerator, the car is still going to stop. Now, in an emergency, hit the brakes. And if you don't want to worry about regen on these cars, when you do hit the brakes, about the first 75% of deceleration is still using the regenerative capability, the brakes. It's still generating electricity. It's just not one pedal driving. And once you get used to one pedal driving, you really like it. And I know the BMW i3 would come to a complete stop as well.
Yes, and the Leaf as well. The Leaf has the option to turn on the one pedal driving, turn it off or on.
Oh, okay.
And so I have it on, and then it also has, instead of L, it has B mode. So for regenerative braking.
Now, another strategy.
You hate the shifter on it. I love the shifter on on both of those cars, actually, the i3 and the Leaf.
I like this one because you just bump it and it toggles back and forth.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. I did not like the one on the first gen Volt. It was just a big clunky.
It was like a normal gas car.
Well, but it was bigger.
The same
it was, but it was bigger too. And I'm not one of those. I know this is something you hate, but I think if you're making a whole new engine with a new type of transmission, all that stuff, you don't have to adhere to the old gas styles. That's kind of, I don't know.
See, I felt the opposite. I didn't think, why make it something that you have to relearn? You already knew.
I forget the word on it, but it's kind of like when they're designing the iPhone and stuff, and the digital versions of common objects, like the calculator. It doesn't have to look like a calculator on the phone. These things don't have to look like their real world.
Or the address book.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look like the real world counterpart. I understand that was easing people into the new technology, but at a certain point, I feel like it's holding you back trying to adhere to that style. And the same thing on this, like you said, why is it called L? Because that's what it was called before for low gear and all that.
And everybody thinks that means it's low gear, and they're afraid to go.
Right. Whereas the Leaf, it's B, and that makes sense.
It's what?
It's B, just for B for braking.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying.
I like that.
Me too.
You're that GM, you should change that L to something else because it's confusing your customers.
I liked, and since we're going down this rabbit hole anyway, on the i3, it had it on the gear, or column here, so you could just switch it up there. Buzz, I don't think Buzz really liked that. You hated that. So
no, you rotated it, didn't you?
Yes, you rotate it forward to drive, and you pull it back to go to reverse, and then there's a P for park. Now this one has the P for park as well.
And the Leaf has it down here, and isn't it a dial as well?
Yeah, the Leaf. I love manual transmission cars. The Leaf reminds me of that when you're shifting it, because you kind of pull it out. It's not a twisting dial like this. It's more like you grab it like a shifter handle and you pull it back to go to reverse, pull it forward to go to D. Now, this is a tip if there's any Leaf drivers out there. I didn't know how to get it neutral. And they don't really explain. There's a little diagram that shows, okay, neutral's in the middle. But there's no middle to, slide the gear into. It's just backwards and forwards. I'm like, whoa. So, the first time I went to a car wash because my car was disgusting, and I could not figure out how to get it neutral. And I'm kind of panicking. And so, what I figured out eventually, after, several minutes of not knowing how to do it, is you kind of hold it halfway between reverse and drive, and it'll switch to neutral. But you have to hold it there for several seconds, and then it'll do it, which is crazy. There's no other way to get neutral. But anyway, yeah, so I really like that. Again, I think eventually cars will look different. I think they'll eventually let's figure out different ways to do this kind of thing. And that's okay. I don't know what it looks like in the Teslas. What's the shifters and Teslas look like?
It's been so long since I got in one, I can't remember. I think it's much like the Volt was. It mimics, at least the Model S that I drove a long time ago. I just did a test drive. That's the only time I've ever driven one.
And I
seemed like it was regular.
I do get it. That again, you want to stick to the old ways. At least for early for getting people involved in it, they can use it, they can see it, and I know what that's like. But at a certain point, the design, I feel like, does hold it back. It doesn't have to be that way. The same thing for the look of it, too. Like the i3 you hated, the original Leaf you hated. But
it grew on me. I do like it.
Right, and it just make a cool-looking car. That's all I care about at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be a boring sedan or anything. Make it what looks the coolest. Now the Honda Clarity, which was it's
plug-in hybrid.
It's like the Volt, sort of. It doesn't entirely run on electric. You have to drive it a certain way to make sure it runs on electric before it switches to gas. I looked at those and I liked it, but that is a old school looking car, not necessarily in the best of ways.
It's like an old person car.
It had the. I don't want to offend anyone.
And that's a 62-year-old guy.
I don't want to offend anyone in the car currently, but
who's in here?
I don't know. Because someone's in the back. But it had the wheel covers in the back. It looked like a long, old school Cadillac.
I understand the aerodynamics, but I think that just looks like an old man car.
I don't know how well it's selling, but I almost talked myself into buying one, and then it was way outside of my price range actually.
Really?
So, yeah. So I didn't do it.
I didn't know they were that expensive.
Well, at the time, I don't know, but it just was outside of what I was trying to pay, and then and Honda wasn't really being aggressive on Leafs or anything else, whereas Nissan was super aggressive trying to get people to buy Leafs. So that's cool, and I think GM's the same way. They're trying to get people into the Bolt and the Bolt they don't even make anymore.
Both the purchase and lease incentives on the Bolt are unbelievable right now. In fact, leasing, I think they can be around $250 a month or something. And if you're spending that much on gasoline, that's like having a free car,
I've seen them even cheaper than that. Honestly, especially in California. California, I see deals all the time on them. My friend actually.
Well, again, they're getting ZEV credits for that, so they really are aggressive.
Right. Because when you get the credits, if you do a lease, they roll into the price of the lease, and.
No, the ZEV credits go back to the manufacturer.
Well, I'm just talking about credits in general, like the
rebate and
rebate and all that. That rolls in the lease, so that's why leases can actually be cheaper on a thing. But either way, like I said, there's just some crazy good deals out there, and then it's all the convenience. And once you get used to it, the range anxiety is not an issue. It's really not.
Well, in fact, one thing I'd mention on that. If you've never driven an electric car, you still already had range anxiety. And you mentioned it earlier. You would hold off going to that gas station to the last minute. So I guarantee you, there were times you were on the way to work where you're thinking, can I make it? Can I make it?
Yeah.
And you're on fumes. And you're thinking, if I make it, when I get off work, will I make it to the gas station before I run out of gas? So that angst you feel is range anxiety. And I'll admit, on that trip when we had the kayak and the bicycles, this first leg of the trip, the car's rated at 259 miles average, but we had it full to the roof from the back of the front seat all the way to the back. We had a kayak on the roof, which is a lot of wind drag. We had bicycles hanging off the back of the car, additional wind drag. And so as we started driving, the predictor up here started falling rapidly. And so we found out that we were going to get about 183 miles of range. And the first charging station that we planned to stop at was 180 miles.
It's an i8.
Look at that, BMW i8,
it's an i8 right there.
Yeah, we need to make sure that shows up in the video. That's a cool looking car. I heard they're discontinuing those.
Are they?
That's what I heard.
Well, the same dealership, the guy that called
Pablo Alicia.
No, not that one. Different dealership. This is because I looked at before that even. The first dealership called the i3, and he did not like it at all. He called the i8 sex on wheels. I was like, sex on wheels, huh?
That seems difficult.
Yeah. It's like an ugly, frumpy egg to sex on wheels. I definitely got where he was going with that, but that was anyway.
This is a PG-13 rated audience.
Yeah, you can say sex on wheels.
you just don't get any more graphic.
I wasn't planning on it.
Now, we did go down a rabbit hole, so let's back up a little bit. We're talking about extending range.
Well, can I say one thing?
Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't know which rabbit hole you're talking about. We've been on several.
Well, we want to talk about strategies to extend your range.
Okay, so this does relate to that somewhat.
Okay.
Because the biggest issue with the Leaf, and Buzz warned me about this, and I knew about it going in, was the fact that it doesn't have the coolant for the battery, so it's not cooling itself down.
It's an air-cooled battery.
Yeah, instead of liquid-cooled, which almost all the other vehicles have, right? Like I know all the GM ones do, and basically what that helps is it helps to offset the environment, whether it's too hot, too cold, whatever. It's keeping your battery so that it helps with range. The Leaf doesn't have that, and so what I've noticed, and I'm in Texas, so obviously the heat was a factor. I'm like, okay, how much is that going to impact it? What I've noticed, it's the cold that impacts it the most as far as range. And Texas has crazy weather. I mean, people don't think about it getting cold or snowing here, but it does. And it also has super hot days, well over 100 triple digits, whatever. But in doing both, I've noticed that I could be driving along and it'll be like 50 degrees and it was getting really cold. All of a sudden it starts dropping down to 30. And I was driving the car one time with my wife, and we were going pretty far on it because we kind of planned it around the range that I expected to have. And it all of a sudden it went below freezing. So it went below 32 and 31, and it started putting up the little icicle warning thing on it, the snowflake symbol, whatever it is. And I'm like, great, what does this mean? And I saw my range start dropping down, and I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. That was a moment of range anxiety because I hadn't planned on it doing that. I'd planned on the range being accurate like it usually had been and having a good idea of what I was getting into before I even got on that trip. And so I'm like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And that was one where we barely made it home on fumes. But just, so what I read ultimately is that, and I don't know if Buzz would agree with this, I don't even know if the science behind it makes sense, but what I read is that cold weather, especially like below freezing, makes the battery drain faster, which I would have thought it would have been the opposite. And hot weather seems to hurt its overall lifespan.
Yes.
And so
and the draining the battery faster, it's that heater is the problem. Now, gasoline cars, because the gasoline engine gets so hot, it's just using that heat to heat up.
But even if we weren't running the heater, like, because that's the thing, we were turning off all kinds of stuff, and like it was still dropping.
Well, it still has to keep the battery warm.
Yeah.
So it probably was running a heater circuit to keep that battery warm.
And that's the thing, like because we were trying everything, we were turning off all the stuff inside the car. I was already in eco mode, and that got pretty scary. Just being able to get back.
And again, you only have to worry about that on longer trips. If you're in town, you'll have more than enough range.
Right, and that's the thing. So, but that just kind of shocked me because in my mind, I thought, oh, colder, it's going to be cooler for the battery. It doesn't have to work as hard in the heat. I thought, what is it going to matter? But no, it's the opposite. So, essentially, in a place like Texas, I'm sure it's going to harm my battery in the long run because the extreme heat's going to make its lifespan not be as long, and the cold, it's not going to have as much range. So that's going to be an issue I'll probably be dealing with at some point. But having said that, because I've had the car close to 3 years now, I haven't had any drops on the bar as far as the health of the battery, the life of the battery, and it still has the range. So it's still really, really good. But just be aware of that. If you suspect the weather's going to change and you're driving a Leaf or one that doesn't have the liquid cooling, just make sure you're aware of that. Now, the Leaf does have the cool, I think they call it a heat pump.
Mm-hmm.
And
more efficient heater.
Yeah, and I don't know that a lot of other cars have that, that's kind of cool. It's a much more efficient heater that can be run separately from the AC. So you could turn off the AC, save the miles, and use the heat pump, which we do.
And realize that's true of a gasoline car, too. When you run the air conditioner, your mileage drops.
Right. But I was also going to say that the things drop and all that, but when you're dealing with like AC and heat and all that, they work so much faster in an electric vehicle. I can get my electric vehicle colder faster. The i3 can get colder much faster than a gas vehicle. I don't know why or how that works. It's like the AC and the heat kick in a lot faster. I don't know why.
Now, back to extending range.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned a strategy just then. We'll go back on this. So, remote starting the car about 10 minutes before you leave, preferably while it's still plugged into the wall. It'll use electricity from the wall to condition not only the interior cabin for your comfort, but it preconditions the battery so it's at the optimal temperature for maximum range. And I did that before this trip.
And you could do it inside a garage because you're not pumping out all the gas. There's no fumes. Right. So if you're in a place like in the DFW area, you're not supposed to leave your car running in your driveway. That's actually against the law. And so you can have this in your garage with it running, and you don't have to worry about the fumes. That's amazing. Back to you.
Back to me. Okay, so the other thing on the air conditioner and heater, I just set the temperature I want it to hold. Now, in the middle of winter, one thing that I would do is I would preconditioned the cabin by starting it 10 minutes before I left. And then once I got in the car, let's say it's a really cold winter day, I might have it set to 74 degrees. I might turn it down to 68 and then turn on the heated seats and heated steering wheel to keep me comfortable. And so those items only use 1/10 of the energy that the space heater uses. And so you get much better range. We mentioned pre-starting the car for preconditioning. Leaving the air conditioner in automatic, not just blasting it on a hot day, but setting it on automatic so that if it starts getting warmer in the car, it'll cool back down to a certain temperature that you like. And I love that. My wife constantly is messing with the fan speed on her car, and I just set it and forget it. I mean, I literally go months without changing that. Overinflating the tires a little bit will get you better range. And I did overinflate the tires a little on this car just to make sure we have enough range.
What do you think of nitrogen in tires?
Say again?
What do you think of nitrogen in tires? My Leaf came with nitrogen initially, and I haven't... do you think that helps with the overall range?
What it does is it keeps you from having to air up the tires and bleed air out of the tires quite as often. An airline pilot told me that the tires on aircraft are inflated with nitrogen so that the tires don't basically explode when it goes up to 30,000 feet. So it expands and contracts less. And because of that, I mean, I've seen it in Texas where one side of my car that's in the shade, the tires are registering a lower air pressure than the tires were on the sunny side of the car just from sunlight hitting it on a cool day. So basically that's what it's doing, is keeping it from, oh, it's a cold day, my tires are, below the optimal pressure, and then, oh, it's a hot day, now I've got to bleed some air out because they're overinflated. Nitrogen just does that less.
Do you think that helps with range at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it keeps it in a nice range for. Because if you underinflate a tire, it will definitely impact your range. Another thing, and I learned this from what they call a dealer trade driver. He would, if some other dealer had a car that my customer wanted, we would swap cars. They might, take a pickup truck and I'd take an electric vehicle and sell it to my customer. But he was driving a very long distance from Houston to Dallas, like we're doing today at one point. And he would do like a bicyclist does in the Tour de France. He would get behind a big semi and draft on it. And so the semi is taking all the wind resistance, and he's in this cocoon behind it, and less wind resistance is a big deal. I think I remember reading somewhere that increasing speed, the resistance cubes over, I can't remember what the exact numbers was, but it was stunning to me. And in fact, that's another thing you can do. You mentioned not driving aggressively. That's not just punching it off the line and slamming on the brakes when you stop. It's, and I always used to set my cruise control at 9 miles over the speed limit, and now I set it at the speed limit to get, like on this drive, to get better range.
Oh, look at that. That's cool.
Look at that. Yeah. I liked going faster. But when I'm on a long cruise, really, how much does 5 miles an hour, 9 miles an hour, whatever, make on a long distance? It's not going to save you that much time. But if it keeps me from having to stop and charge one additional time on this circuit, that's a pretty big deal, because I'm only going to eat 2 meals today. I'm not going to need to boy, that truck's right on my rear end. We should have had a camera pointing backwards. That would have been interesting.
We still have time today. Who knows what we'll do?
Yeah, that's true. We got a lot of fun stuff we're going to do today. Yeah. So again, not driving too aggressively, overinflate the tires, precondition the car, use regenerative braking at its maximum level to regen energy back into the battery, draft off of other vehicles, especially if you're getting towards the end. And in fact, the Bolt has a setting that if I get below a certain percentage, and you can set it at 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10% of the remaining of the battery capacity. If it gets below that, it'll even turn off the stereo to save electricity. But again, once you get used to driving these things, when I freaked out with the kayak and the bicycles on the car that first day, and we made it to the charger with only probably 2 miles left, what I learned was after that, I could absolutely depend on 180 miles.
Yes.
once I knew what that wind resistance was, I never had range anxiety again because I always knew exactly where it was going to stop.
Also, most cars, gas cars, they will tell you down to the miles what you have. That's what people look at. It's not just a simple gauge anymore. You can actually say, I got 10 miles or whatever. But people don't trust that as much because it's not 100% accurate. It fluctuates a lot. So when I got into an EV, I was like, okay, is it going to be like that where it's a crazy guess, it's not really accurate? What I found is that it's really accurate. And it learns the way you drive, so it's doing kind of an average. So in my case, I found that having the same person drive that car for an extended period of time, it really does learn your driving habits, and it can really be accurate. Versus if my wife and I swapped out on cars, which we did a few times, I would get in the car and the range would be completely different because it's like she drives it so much more aggressively. Seriously, she drives it so much more aggressively, and it's giving her less range than it gives me.
But that means the car's learning,
right,
based on how you guys drive.
Which is what I'm saying. So, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, though. So, I would say another way to make sure that you increase your range is to drive it how you're going to drive it, at least for a few days before, like if you're going on an extended trip, so that you can kind of trust what it's doing and it learns you. You know what I mean? So that way this is pretty accurate. This is based on my driving style. These are the miles I'm going to get. So, but and also I don't know, is this true or not that that even after it goes into like when it's showing you don't have any miles or 0 miles, is there not a little bit of a reserve mileage that it has? Is that true?
I know the Chevy Volt had some extra range that if you ran it out of electricity and switched to gas and then you ran it completely out of gas, I had read that people had done that and it gave them, it's very few miles, probably 5 miles or less, but to limp into a gas station to fill up or a charger to charge up. When we went on that camping trip, like I said, we were down to 2 or 3 miles, but once you get below about 10 miles, it just says low over here.
That's what. Okay, so that's not just a Leaf thing.
No,
my Leaf does the same thing.
What they don't want is for you to call up and say, hey, it said I had a mile left and it stopped, So.
My Leaf does the same thing, and it drives me nuts. And I've only had it happen a few times, but it's like, yeah, when it gets under 10, when it gets into single digits, it doesn't tell you. It just keeps giving you warnings. And I'm like, I know, car, but how many miles do I have? Do I have 1 mile or 10? Because that is a big difference. But anyway. But yeah, I've definitely... But again, I've done that with gas vehicles too. I've definitely limped into gas stations not knowing if I was going to get there. I remember a particular trip where we were driving out to Lubbock in a gas vehicle, and we barely made it to the gas station. So that's nothing that's new or unique to EVs. It is just a different mindset, different planning it, and getting used to it, and the car getting used to you and your habits. And then you get to where you don't want to go back to gas, and you can't imagine not driving anything that's this.
I'll never go back to a 100% gas car, and I'm sure that my next vehicle will be 100% electric. I wish they hadn't stopped making the Volt. I think that while the infrastructure is rolling out, the Volt is an excellent choice for cross-country driving. We drove ours up to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, and we didn't have to look for charging stations. We charged when we got to Estes Park because they had free charging. By the way, how many times do you go to a gas station and go, oh, go ahead and fill up for free, we don't care. But the level 2 chargers are out there. Quite a few of them are free to use because it's a vendor that wants you to stop by. It's a movie theater that wants you to go to them instead of a different movie theater, or a shopping mall that wants you to shop there instead of a different shopping mall.
Yeah, in fact, before we got our charger at our house, when I first got her i3, there was a Kohl's by our house, and it had free charging that was never used.
So that's real close to your house. Yeah, almost walking distance.
Well, it's pretty close. So we would drive it. We would drive it there and park it there, and what we do is we plan it. So we'd go there. She'd drive it there after work, park it, and then and you could get alerts on your phone. That's the other cool thing. You can see your phone, how it's doing. And then I would pick her up, and we'd go out to eat or whatever we're going to do, and then come home, and then we'd get it later on. And so that's not the most convenient thing, but that did work. I would definitely say if you're going to get one, get a charger. If you're in an apartment, that's where it gets a little more challenging. You would have to plan your days around where you can go and park it. But if
the cool thing is,
if you got charging at work though, easy peasy, I would say.
Yeah. The cool thing about today's cars for apartment dwellers is with this much range, you can start thinking of recharging more like a gas car going to a gas station. You know, you don't top up your gas car every day on the way home. You fill up maybe once a week, once every 5 days. Well, same thing with an electric car that has this much range. If you do live in an apartment and you can't charge at home, then you just fill up, say, once a week or every 5 days, and you go to a DC fast charger, which in 30 minutes can put 100 miles of range in the car. And I think that's the big thing. Now, one thing you said just then I would disagree with. Every electric car I know of comes with a 110 charger. Now, the 110-volt charger plugs into a regular wall outlet like your smartphone.
I do disagree with that, because the trickle charging, as they call it.
Let me finish. If your daily commute is 40 to 50 miles, you're still going to fill that battery up if you plug in when you get home by the time you wake up the next morning. And so every day you're still leaving home with a full tank, and there's no reason to spend $500 for a level 2 charger. And admittedly, I've got 2 level 2 chargers at my house. I like charging faster, you know, and most people do. But you don't have to do it.
You don't have to, and I can't argue that. But as far as getting people to adopt and all that, like, because what would happen is if you're the kind of person who doesn't charge every night, and then all of a sudden you've got to charge, it's a slow process, and it may not be ready when you need it to be, especially if you wait till the last second.
Right.
But it's a really slow process, because we also tried that as well.
Well, you get about 4 miles of range for each hour you're plugged in at 12 amps.
And the thing is too, so in that car, which is sub 100 miles, if you drove it a lot, but you don't just go to work in your car. Like, you might do other things, other errands, and that's where it really starts to kind of compound, because now you meet more and you're having to charge, and it takes a lot longer. So I would definitely say, if you're going to get one, invest in a level 2 charger. You can do the Clipper Creeks like we did. You could do, there's big fancy ones. BMW has big fancy ones. But they're worth it. They're especially worth it, just pulling in and doing it.
I love having it. I'm glad we have 2 level 2 chargers.
Like, because like I said, we tried it without one for a while, and you could do it. You can make it work, but not everybody's going to have a station as close to their house and all that. So I would definitely say, if you've got a house, do it. If you're in an apartment, and you're going to have to figure out what's around you to charge at. And
there are plenty of apps for your smartphone that'll show you where the chargers are, if they're occupied currently, if they're down for maintenance. In fact, we are headed to a parking garage in Austin that has only 1 charge port, and there may be somebody using it. There may be a gasoline car parked there. Gasoline cars are, in the electric vehicle world, are called ICE, for internal combustion engine. And a person that parks a gasoline-powered car in a parking spot blocking a charger is known as an ICE hole. Just a little bit of EV slang there for you.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go that route. But that does suck too, because there is nothing you can do about it. We had that happen to us at the Kohl's charging one. There's different places we've gone to where it's like people, just park there. It'll be a huge gas guzzling gas guzzling SUV, and it's like there's nothing they can do. I guess there's no official law about it. No one's going to enforce it. I don't know. That's a weird thing.
Yeah, and that actually is something that I'd like to see the legislature in Texas do. Let's come up with standardized signs, and just like a handicap parking spot, it's important, because you might be preventing somebody from making it home. It'd be like if all the electric vehicles, if there were even more of them now, if they all just felt like parking in front of the gas pumps at the gas station, and you needed to fill up your car, that would be upsetting, and you might not be happy with those people. Well,
right.
If you do drive a gasoline car, don't be an ice hole. Don't block somebody's ability to get home just because you want to park a little closer to the front door of the store. It's a jerk move. Don't do it.
I really wish they would do it at movie theaters, by the way. That's something you and I have talked about.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because you're going to be sitting in a movie for 2 hours, at least, and then, okay, so then your car can charge, especially if it's quick charging. Now, the quick charging is interesting because Depending on your model of car, there's different kinds of quick chargers. Like the Japanese, like my car uses CHAdeMO, right? And then
CHAdeMO, yeah.
CHAdeMO, and then what's the other one?
This one uses CCS,
That's
and then
right.
Tesla has supercharger. Now, that's interesting thing, and I know this because I was doing some teaching for Chevrolet, and one of the other presenters talked about this. Teslas in Europe, you can get them with the same plug this car uses, CCS. And they're going to roll that out apparently in the United States as an option. So Tesla's always just been you charge at a Tesla charger and that's it, or you have to buy a special adapter. Well, it's like the old VHS and beta days. And in the gasoline world, don't think that you're different. You just got used to it. There's the diesel pump, which has a different diameter nozzle from a regular gasoline pump. So it's still a different kind of plug, but you're putting fluid in. And in the gasoline world, it's just so you don't put the wrong fluid in. Well, the CHAdeMO, the Asian market, is now moving to CCS as well. So
Really?
it's like how VHS won, and I was a beta fan. I hated VHS. The same thing is going to happen.
Let's use a more modern one, HD, DVD, and Blu-ray. Even that's outdated.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
DVD to Blu-ray.
I'm kidding. That's even
I
outdated.
had a laser disc.
No one even knows HD, DVD anymore. It's sad. Or beta. I'm giving you a hard time. Both of those examples are outdated.
Well, I've been around the block a few million times now.
No, I'm just saying, but yes, it definitely is. It's a format war, and yeah, when you do that, you end up with cars that have different quick charging, which is the reason I bring it up, because you got to plan for that too. If you have a Leaf like mine that has the CHAdeMO style quick charger, you're gonna have to make sure when you're going to a quick charging station, if you're planning your trip out, that it has that connector. Because I have been to some that didn't have it, and vice versa. When we tried to find some that had the CCS, and we didn't see that either. So.
And again, there are phone apps that do that for you.
Yes.
Where you can filter out the ones that won't connect to your car, so you only see locations or chargers that actually work with your car.
And they also tell you if it's occupied too.
What's that?
They also tell you if it's occupied.
I do like that.
Not necessarily by a gas guzzler, but by electric person plugged in.
Speaking of which, do you have PlugShare on your smartphone?
I don't have it on. Yeah, I had it on my old one, but I don't have it downloaded for the new one.
Oh, okay. Because I would like to check this single charger in the parking garage we're going to make sure it's not
download
occupied.
it. Yeah, let's download it.
Let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, you see all these people passing me. I'm doing the speed limit.
What?
They're doing maybe 10 miles over, and I'm not, babying the car or anything. I'm just doing the legal limit.
Which I gotta say, I appreciate. Sometimes riding with Buzz is like riding with a bat out of hell. It's just the same.
I am an aggressive driver. I like, and
What-
that's
what's
why I
your-
like my electric vehicles.
Did the one on PlugShare?
Yep.
Even though it says Tesla? Okay.
Yeah, it'll be all of them. And then I always filter out Blink because Blink is too expensive.
Blink, yeah. Again, I'm not trying to rag on Blink. It is expensive, and a lot of the screens don't work. They don't seem like their maintenance is very good on those.
Yeah, they went bankrupt at one point, and another company bought them out, and I think they've been struggling.
I used to use
ever since.
ChargePoint, but that's a whole.
Well, ChargePoint. Well, you want to go with PlugShare because PlugShare is brand specific.
Yeah.
ChargePoint's just going to look for ChargePoint chargers. Now, I have the ChargePoint, Electrify America, and EVgo apps in my phone because instead of pulling out a credit card or calling an 800 number and giving them my credit card, I can just wave my phone in front of the charger and charge.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and it also keeps me up to date with how the charge is going. So if the charge is interrupted for any reason, I'll get a message on my phone that lets me know. And if I'm at the restaurant eating, I can take a quick break, run back to the car, and see what's going on.
So what were you looking for? What did you want to know?
The address we're going to is 75-1/2, so 75 and a half, Rainey Street, Rainey.
Yep, very familiar.
In Austin.
I used to live in Austin.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you know this area.
I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a really cool food truck park there that you were really wanting to check out food trucks, and I found that.
Well, Buzz and I, me being a vegetarian leaning vegan and him being a carnivore, we definitely have different opinion. I thought it might be cool if we could each get barbecue, if I could find some vegan barbecue for him to try, and then I'm not going to try regular barbecue, but I will definitely look on their menu and get something I can eat if we go to somewhere else. Let's see. So what do you want me to look at? Like, here's this.
There's a Charger there in the Rainy Street parking garage, which is at 75.5.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got this one.
Tap on the yellow one. The yellow one's CCS.
Yeah, this is at 70 Rainy. Is that not the same? I don't know.
It's 75.5.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
It's listed 70 Rainy, but it's at 75.5 Rainy. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Is it occupied currently? We're still an hour and a half away.
So there's one station.
Not down for maintenance.
Station detail. So it has both quick charger types, by the way. It has a chat
mode on the CCS one.
Yep. Make sure I'm doing this right, because again, I have not actually used this app. I've used different ones. I don't know how to.
And while you're looking that up, I wanted to mention something. When we left home, the car predicted that we had 3 miles of extra range, more than we needed to make it to the charger. Now, right now, on the big display, I have Apple CarPlay, which is the maps, so it's showing me that I've got 96 miles to go to get to the charger. And over here, it's telling me I have 119 miles of range. So that means we went from having a 3-mile margin to a 20, let's see, that's 95 and 119. So a 24-mile surplus of energy. So we got more than enough to make it to the parking garage. And I've got absolutely no range anxiety. Even with 3 miles, I felt like I was not going to have range anxiety. But the difference is the car had learned to predict its range based on carrying a kayak and bicycles. This is actually a brand new Bolt that is owned by the dealership. So it's hardly been driven except for that really long trip I took it on. So it learned that to expect the wind drag of all that extra equipment and all the camping gear, the weight of all the camping gear in the back, and now that we're traveling lighter today and we don't have all that wind drag, it's learning that it's getting much, much better range. We're getting 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is pretty good for going 75 miles an hour.
How do I do it in here? Because I'm not seeing the thing. Like I can go to station details, but it just tells me.
I can't look at it.
I know. I don't really see the thing in here.
There is a status there that tells you.
I know. I'm not. No doubt.
But
it does have descriptions here, which is kind of funny because it has like some check-ins and stuff. Like one person in February wrote that they were iSpire Range Rover.
Yeah.
But it's cool. There's been a Bolt EV there. There's been Model 3. There's the Nero EV.
Yeah, a lot of people have charged there, but I saw that it had been blocked by ICE vehicles. One thing I was wondering about is, since it's Sunday and we're going to get there at 11 a.m., are there churches right around that where church parishioners might be parking in a parking garage and maybe either charging or blocking that charger?
See, what's cool is, I know Austin's more liberal, but I'm looking at it right now, like, you can, if you guys can see that, but it's like charging stations all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And you could plan your trip accordingly.
Austin, if you walk around downtown, you'll see so many electric vehicles driving around. They've been really focused on, in fact, I was at a meeting with the mayor. He did a luncheon for dealers who sold electric vehicles, and I went down as a member of TechCetra to do a presentation. And Austin is the number one city in the United States based on the rate it is reducing its carbon footprint. So they are very focused on reducing pollution in that area. And Austin is just a beautiful city. The lakes and rivers around it are so clear you can see down 30 feet below the water to the rocks at the bottom. I mean, it's just, they really care about the environment, and it's a beautiful area of Texas. So I'm grateful that they're keeping it clean down there.
Yeah, this is cool.
So I guess we'll find out when we get there.
Yeah. But I definitely...
But there are other chargers. Oh, and we mentioned 3 different types of chargers. So earlier I mentioned that one 10-volt charger where you can just plug it into any outlet at your house pretty much is going to put about 4 miles of range per hour of charging. The level 2 chargers, we mentioned that one, that you can have those for your home, and they would plug into like a dryer outlet, a 240 volt outlet. They'll put about 25 miles of range in for each hour that you're charging. And then on a long road trip, you specifically want to look for what's called a DC fast charger. Now, those first two types of chargers are really just, they're like wall outlets. The charger hardware is in the car. And that's where the conversion of the AC electricity from the outlet gets converted into DC to get stored into the battery. Now, when you do DC fast charging, you're bypassing the charger that's built into the car, and DC is going straight to the battery. And it is a much faster charge. And like I said, the first hour you're plugged, or first half hour you're plugged in, you're going to get about 100 miles of range. So that's effectively like getting 200 miles per hour. But the reason they specify it like that is as a lithium-ion battery gets closer and closer to being filled, when you're shoving electricity into it at that rate, you can hurt the battery if you keep that rate at that high speed all the way to the battery being full.
Yeah, so are you saying you shouldn't do it too often? Like
No. Well,
on a single trip, like, is there a max you think you should quick charge? Like,
well, I have read that in the case of the Nissan Leaf with an air-cooled battery, they want you not to fill up, consecutive charges on DC fast. But in the cars that are liquid-cooled especially, they will slow down that charge rate as the battery is filling, where 259 miles of range could take as much as, say, 2.5 hours to put into the car. And it's just being gentle on the battery. It's making sure the battery lasts longer. And because of that, if you need a quick fill up or a quick boost, plug in for just 30 minutes, get that 100 miles of range. But don't top off the battery at a DC fast charger, because it may be as slow as a level 2 charger if you're close to being full. So don't top off at a DC fast. But we're going to drain the battery almost all the way down every time we stop. We really only want to stop 2 times.
It's going to be fun, yeah.
So we're going to do
DC
we're
not going to stop 7 times, for sure, to charge anyway.
And I think on their behalf, they probably did not have electric vehicle driving experience like you and I have. True,
but I don't know. But
and they did stop at chargers where either the charger wasn't working or they were iced. So, I'll forgive that. But they should have said, in the real world, you don't have to stop that often.
Right.
Well, that's it for now. We've talked your ear off. We'll touch base when we get closer to Austin.